Across the counter, Rebecca froze, her smile cracking as James leaned in too close again. For a heartbeat, her eyes met Nathan's, pleading, searching, and he realized everyone else was looking away. The morning sun spilled through the wide front windows of Sunrise Diner, turning the black and white checkered floor into a mosaic of soft gold, hiding none of the silent drama unfolding between steaming coffee cups and half-eaten breakfast plates. Nathan Coleman leaned back against the red vinyl booth, the kind that squeaked faintly when you shifted and let the warmth seep across your shoulders. His coffee sat steaming beside him, the aroma sharp but comforting, a reminder that even on mornings when the world felt heavy, there were still rituals that steadied him. Across from him, Lily was on a mission. At 7 years old, she attacked her pancakes with the seriousness of a surgeon, drenching them in syrup until the plate looked more like a pond than a breakfast dish. She giggled as she tried to cut them herself, the knife clinking against the ceramic in a way that made Nathan suppress a smile. She wasn't very successful, but she was determined, and he knew better than to intervene too soon. Teaching her, letting her try and stumble, was part of being a dad. "Try holding the fork steady with your other hand," Nathan suggested, his voice gentle. He resisted the urge to just take the knife and do it for her. Lily followed his instructions, her tongue peeking out the corner of her mouth in concentration. The next cut was a little cleaner. She looked up at him proudly, her eye bright as though she had conquered something enormous. "See? Told you." Nathan gave her a wink. She giggled again, more freely this time, and shoved the uneven triangle of pancake into her mouth. Syrup dripped down her chin, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand. Nathan passed her a napkin wordlessly, shaking his head in mock exasperation. She grinned, knowing full well she had made him smile. These were the moments he lived for, the quiet, ordinary mornings where the world felt simple. No deadlines looming, no bills pressing at the edges of his thoughts, no reminders of everything he carried alone since Marie's cancer took her 3 years ago. Just a booth, a plate of pancakes, and his daughter's laughter filling the space. For a man who often felt like life was an uphill climb, these small rituals were the level ground where he could catch his breath. Between bites, Lily launched into a detailed plan for their weekend. "We can go to the park, Daddy, and maybe fly the kite if the wind's good. And then, oh, we could bake cookies, but only if you promise not to burn them like last time." Nathan chuckled, raising his hands in surrender. "One time, Lily, one time I left them in too long, and suddenly I'm the worst baker in Millwood. They were black, Daddy, black. Even Mrs. Parker's dog wouldn't eat them." Her laughter nearly caused her to choke on her pancake. Nathan reached across and ruffled her hair, watching her beam at him with sticky cheeks. She was his anchor, reminding him that joy didn't have to be bought, that laughter could survive even the hardest seasons. He sipped his coffee slowly, letting the warmth coat his throat, content to let her chatter fill the space. His mind drifted momentarily to the stack of bills waiting at home. The water heater needed replacing, and the overtime he'd been counting on had disappeared when the Westridge project got delayed. $63 and change for breakfast was an expense he probably shouldn't allow, but seeing Lily's face light up when they walked through these doors, that was worth more than the money he'd have saved staying home. It was in the middle of that laughter, when Lily's voice was rising with excitement about the dragon design she wanted for their kite, that Nathan's attention drifted. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of their waitress. Rebecca Mitchell, according to her name tag. She moved quickly between tables, balancing a tray with practiced ease, her apron slightly askew. She wore a smile, the kind every waitress wore to keep a shift running smoothly. But her eyes told a different story. Nathan didn't know why, but something in her expression made him pause, something that didn't belong in the easy rhythm of a breakfast crowd. He blinked, took another sip of coffee, and tried to shake the thought off. Maybe he was imagining it. After all, this was supposed to be their peaceful morning, but the seed of unease had been planted. Nathan tried to keep his focus on Lily's weekend plans, nodding along as she spoke about kites and cookies and a possible trip to the library. Her voice was animated, her hands flapping for emphasis as syrupy forkfuls punctuated her excitement. But even as he listened, his eyes kept straying back to Rebecca. Her name tag was worn at the edges, the plastic faded from years of use. She moved briskly, weaving between tables with the balance of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Yet despite the smooth motions, there was tension riding in her shoulders, a stiffness that didn't match the easy smile fixed on her face. Nathan followed her gaze and noticed the man at the counter. He sat with his back straight on the stool, a tailored suit jacket draped over the seat beside him. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place, and his manicured hands cradled a coffee mug that he barely sipped from. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his polished shoes to the gold watch glinting on his wrist. He leaned forward every time Rebecca passed, like he was waiting for an excuse to speak. His voice was too low for Nathan to catch, but Rebecca's reaction told him enough. The first time it happened, she stiffened, her fingers tightening around the coffee pot until her knuckles whitened. She covered it with a quick smile, but Nathan had seen that kind of smile before. The kind people used when they wanted to smooth something over to avoid making it worse. Lily's fork scraped against her plate, pulling Nathan back for a moment. "Can we go after breakfast, Daddy? To the park?" "Yeah, we can do that," he said, giving her a smile, though his attention was still partly fixed on Rebecca. When Rebecca walked past again, the man reached out, touching her arm unnecessarily as he asked for a refill. The touch lingered a moment too long, and though Rebecca's smile didn't falter, she took a small step back, creating distance. A maneuver Nathan recognized, the instinctive pull of someone trying to shrink out of reach, the kind of subtle movement people made when they couldn't just walk away. Each time she approached the man's seat, her eyes flicked briefly toward the swinging kitchen doors. Quick glances, fleeting but desperate, as if she were measuring how far she'd have to walk to disappear into safety. The third sign was unmistakable. When she set down his plate, his hand brushed hers, just a glancing touch, casual enough to look accidental. But she flinched, not dramatically, but enough that her whole arm stiffened and her smile faltered for the briefest second. Nathan's stomach turned cold at the sight. He glanced down at Lily, hoping she hadn't noticed. But she had. She was watching, her fork paused halfway to her mouth, her little brow furrowed. She didn't have the words to name it, but she felt it too. Rebecca's voice had changed. Nathan strained to listen, and what he heard was different from earlier. When she had taken their order, she had spoken with confidence, her tone bright, practiced, even cheerful. Now it was quiet, almost shaky, like someone trying to keep themselves steady while standing on thin ice. And then the fifth sign, the one that clenched it for him. Rebecca laughed at something the man said, but it wasn't laughter. Not really. It was brittle, high-pitched, hollow. The kind of sound people used when they were trying to smooth a situation over to keep it from boiling over. It carried no warmth, no joy, just the brittle edge of someone forcing themselves to pretend. Nathan's jaw tightened, his eyes flicked back to Lily again, and she was staring openly at Rebecca now. Finally, she tugged at his sleeve, her small hand clutching the fabric like it was urgent. "Daddy?" she whispered. Just one word, soft but heavy. Nathan turned to her. "Yes, sweetheart?" Her voice dropped lower, as if afraid the man at the counter might hear. She looked scared. The words landed like a stone in his chest. He had been hoping he was overthinking it, that maybe Rebecca was just tired. Maybe it was just a bad morning. But hearing Lily say it, seeing the fear mirrored in his daughter's young eyes, made it impossible to ignore. If a child could see it, then it was real. Nathan took a slow sip of coffee, though the warmth no longer comforted him. His mind was racing. He had been in situations before where the safer choice was to keep your head down, pretend not to notice, let someone else step in. But here there was no one else. The cook was buried in the back. Other customers were bent over their breakfasts, absorbed in their own lives. And Rebecca had no one. Lily's small hand was still gripping his sleeve. She wasn't just asking a question now. She was looking at him to see what he would do. Nathan's pulse quickened, his heart thudding harder with each passing second. He knew the truth of it. If he stayed silent, if he looked away, what lesson would that teach his daughter? That you ignore someone in trouble? That fear is stronger than kindness? And that wasn't the example he wanted to set. Nathan sat rigid in the booth, the red vinyl pressing against his back as if trying to push him forward. The coffee in his mug had gone lukewarm, but he held it anyway, using it as a shield while his mind churned. "Don't cause a scene," a voice in his head warned. "You don't know the full story. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe she's fine." But another voice cut through, sharper and louder. "You've had this talk with Lily 100 times about being brave, about doing the right thing even when it isn't easy. What kind of father are you if you tell her one thing and then do the opposite?" He glanced across the table. Lily had stopped eating. Her fork rested on her plate, forgotten, syrup pooling underneath it. She was still watching Rebecca, her young face tense in a way he wasn't used to seeing. Childhood was supposed to be light, full of laughter and pancakes, not heavy with questions about why grown-ups sometimes fail to protect each other. Nathan shifted his gaze back to Rebecca. She moved quickly, but her steps carried strain. Her smile flashed, then dimmed just as fast, her shoulders tightening each time the man leaned forward. She wasn't going to ask for help. That much was clear. People rarely did. But her silence didn't erase her need. Nathan's chest tightened. He remembered nights when Lily was smaller, when she'd wake up crying after a nightmare, how quickly he would leap out of bed, how instinctively he had gone to her, whispering that she was safe, that nothing could hurt her while he was there. That same instinct roared in him now, but it was directed at a woman he didn't even know. He took another sip of coffee, but the bitter taste only fueled his frustration. He could sit here, pretend not to notice, let Rebecca keep fending for herself. But if he did, Lily would see it. She'd see that her dad, her protector, her example had looked away when someone needed help. Lily tugged at his sleeve again, smaller this time, as if she could sense his hesitation. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you going to help her?" Nathan's throat tightened. He set the mug down carefully, his hand trembling, just enough that he noticed it. He thought about all the times in his life when silence had been the easier path, when keeping your head down kept you out of trouble, when looking away let you avoid conflict. But he also thought about the weight of regret, the knowledge that you could have done something and didn't. He looked at Lily, her wide eyes locked on him. This moment wasn't just about Rebecca. It was about her, about what kind of father she would remember him to be. He drew in a slow breath, his decision crystallizing, heavy but certain. The man at the counter wore a name tag on his expensive suit jacket, half visible beneath his unbuttoned coat. James Harrington, it read, with Harrington Development in smaller letters beneath. The name rang a bell in Nathan's mind, but he couldn't immediately place it. Something from work, perhaps. Nathan's construction company had taken on several new projects recently, and he hadn't kept track of all the developers involved. A flash of recognition suddenly hit him. Harrington was the developer behind the Westridge Homes project, the very project whose delay had cost Nathan his overtime. The connection created an unexpected complication. If this man had influence with his boss, any confrontation could have professional consequences. Nathan's stomach tightened. He had Lily to think about, bills to pay. The water heater wouldn't fix itself. But there was Rebecca, pouring coffee with hands that trembled slightly, her eyes darting toward the kitchen door again. And there was Lily, watching him with those trusting eyes, waiting to see what her father would do when someone needed help. Just then the scene shifted. Rebecca was setting down a glass of water at Harrington's place, and as she turned to leave, his hand moved again, this time more deliberately. He gripped her wrist, stopping her mid-motion. The action was swift, controlled, hidden from most of the diner by his body, but Nathan saw it clearly. Rebecca froze completely, like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment, she seemed transported somewhere else entirely, her eyes vacant with a memory Nathan couldn't see. A plate crashed to the floor near the kitchen, breaking the spell. Rebecca pulled her arm free, nodded mechanically at something Harrington said, and hurried away. But the damage was done. The vacant look in her eyes told Nathan more than words could have. This wasn't just discomfort. It was a deeper fear, something that reached beyond this moment. That split second of completely frozen panic reminded Nathan of something. The expression of a new guy on his construction site when a steel beam had swung too close. Pure, instinctive terror. The kind that came from knowing real danger. The kitchen doors swung open, and Nathan caught a glimpse of Rebecca speaking urgently to an older woman in a manager's uniform. He couldn't hear the words, but the manager's dismissive gesture and quick headshake were clear enough. Rebecca's shoulders slumped as the manager turned away, leaving her standing alone by the coffee urns. Nathan slid his plate aside and pushed himself up from the booth. His heart thudded against his ribs, but his movements were steady. Lily watched him with a mixture of fear and hope, her small hands folded tight in her lap. As he straightened, he caught Rebecca's eyes across the diner. She froze for half a second, startled, but then something flickered in her gaze. Relief, as if she had been silently wishing someone would notice, someone would care enough to stand. Nathan gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "You're not alone anymore." Then he turned toward the counter, each step carrying the weight of a choice he couldn't take back. "Stay here, Lily. I'll be right back." Nathan's voice carried quiet authority, the same tone he used on construction sites when safety was at stake. Not frightening, but firm. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. Lily nodded, her eyes wide, watching as her father walked toward the counter. The diner's hum dulled as Nathan walked toward the counter, each step sounding louder in his own ears than it should have. Forks clinked against plates. Someone laughed at a joke from a back booth. The jukebox crackled faintly, playing an old Johnny Cash tune, but for him, the world had narrowed to Rebecca and the man leaning across the counter. As Nathan approached, he noticed more details about Harrington. The perfectly pressed suit probably cost more than Nathan made in 2 weeks. An expensive fountain pen peeked from his breast pocket, and a leather portfolio sat beside his plate, embossed with gold initials. Everything about him spoke of privilege and power, the kind of man used to getting his way. Rebecca's eyes met Nathan's as he approached. For a heartbeat, she seemed surprised, as though she hadn't expected anyone to break the invisible wall around her. Then a flicker of relief softened her face, the rigid tension in her shoulders dipping ever so slightly. Nathan reached the counter and took the empty stool beside Harrington, deliberately casual. Not confrontational, not yet, just a man sitting down for coffee. Harrington glanced at him briefly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features at having his space invaded, before returning his attention to Rebecca. "Could I get some coffee?" Nathan asked, his voice pitched to include Rebecca without directly acknowledging the tension. He kept his tone deliberately warm, almost familiar, as if speaking to someone he knew well. Her lips parted, confusion and gratitude mixing in her expression. "Of course," she said, relief evident in the way her voice steadied. She reached for a clean mug, her movements more fluid now that someone else had entered her orbit. Harrington shifted on his stool, his body language closing off slightly. As Rebecca poured the coffee, Nathan nodded thanks, his eyes meeting hers for a moment longer than necessary. A silent communication passed between them, acknowledgement of the situation without words. She set the mug down carefully, her fingers no longer trembling. Harrington cleared his throat, drawing Rebecca's attention back. "I'm still waiting on that check," he said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to command. "And maybe a fresh cup while I'm waiting. This one's gone cold." Nathan watched as Rebecca's shoulders tensed again. She nodded, reaching for the coffee pot, but her hand brushed against the silverware, sending a spoon clattering to the floor. The small sound seemed to echo in the space between them. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, bending quickly to retrieve it. Harrington sighed audibly, the sound loaded with impatience. "You're a bit scattered today, aren't you?" His tone carried false concern over thinly veiled criticism. Nathan took a deliberate sip of his coffee, then set the mug down with a soft clink. "Good coffee," he commented, his voice pitched to include both of them in the conversation. Rebecca straightened, the spoon clutched in her hand like a tiny shield. "Rebecca makes the best coffee in town," Nathan added, using her name naturally as if they were old acquaintances. "Have you worked here long?" The unexpected question, directed at her rather than about her, seemed to startle both Rebecca and Harrington. "Almost 3 years," she replied, a hint of genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. "My daughter and I come in most Saturdays," Nathan continued, gesturing toward Lily, who watched intently from their booth. "She swears nobody makes pancakes like they do here." Rebecca's posture relaxed slightly, responding to the normalcy of the conversation. "She's adorable," she said, her voice warming. "The Mickey Mouse pancakes are her favorite." Nathan nodded, surprised she had remembered. "That's right, with chocolate chips for eyes." Harrington shifted on his stool, clearly annoyed at being sidelined in the conversation. "The check," he reminded Rebecca, his voice firmer now. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Rebecca nodded quickly, the brief moment of ease evaporating. She moved toward the register, her steps hurried. Nathan watched her go, then turned slightly toward Harrington, assessing him more directly now. Busy morning, Nathan asked, keeping his tone conversational. Harrington gave him a dismissive glance. Always. Some of us can't afford to waste time. The condescension was unmistakable, but Nathan let it slide over him. He'd dealt with enough entitled clients on construction sites to recognize the type. Men who measured their worth by how little they thought of others. I hear that, Nathan replied evenly. Construction business keeps me running too. Coleman Construction. We're working on the Riverside expansion now. Something shifted in Harrington's expression, a flicker of recognition, followed by a more calculating look. Coleman, he said, his tone shifting to professional interest. You're with Martin's crew? Site foreman, Nathan confirmed, watching the mental recalculation happening behind Harrington's eyes. He could almost see the moment Harrington placed him in the hierarchy, not just some random guy at a diner counter, but someone connected to his business interest. We're handling several projects on the east side, Harrington said, his voice taking on a networking tone. Westridge Homes, the new commercial strip on Pine Street. He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the counter. James Harrington, Harrington Development. Nathan nodded, taking the card without offering one in return. I know Westridge. That's Martin's project too. Heard there were some delays. Harrington waved a dismissive hand. Permit issues. Nothing serious. Should be back on track next week. Rebecca returned with the check, sliding it carefully in front of Harrington, avoiding his reach. Nathan noticed the maneuver, the way she positioned herself at a distance, the way her body angled away even as she leaned in to set down the slip of paper. Harrington glanced at the check, then back at Rebecca. His expression shifted, the businessman persona sliding away to reveal something colder underneath. You got my coffee wrong again, he said, his voice dropping. I asked for cream. I'm sorry, Rebecca said automatically, reaching for his cup. I'll fix that right away. Harrington caught her wrist again, faster than Nathan expected. Don't bother, he said, his fingers visibly tightening. I don't have time now. Maybe you can get it right next time. His eyes held hers in a way that made the comment sound like more than just talk about coffee. Rebecca went completely still, her breathing shallow. The same frozen look from earlier returned, her eyes fixed somewhere middle distance. Nathan recognized the response now. Not just fear, but a trauma response. Someone had hurt her before. Nathan set his coffee mug down with deliberate firmness, the sound breaking the moment. She's busy working, he said, his voice quiet but carrying unmistakable steel. Why don't you give her some space? Harrington turned, his eyes narrowing, his hand still around Rebecca's wrist. The silence that followed stretched for 3 long heartbeats. A small hush fell over the nearest tables, conversations pausing as the shift in energy rippled outward. Excuse me? Harrington's voice was low, dangerous, his grip on Rebecca's wrist not loosening. Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice or lean forward. He sat there, calm and immovable. You're hurting her, he said simply, nodding toward where Harrington's fingers pressed into Rebecca's skin. And she doesn't look like she wants to talk to you. For a moment, tension coiled between them, thick enough that Rebecca stopped breathing. Nathan's heart pounded hard, but he refused to let it show. He'd learned long ago that sometimes strength wasn't about swinging fists. It was about holding steady when someone tried to push. I was just being friendly, Harrington said, releasing Rebecca's wrist with exaggerated slowness, as if to emphasize it was his choice to let go. She didn't seem to mind before you showed up. Rebecca took a step back immediately, rubbing her wrist where his fingers had pressed. She didn't speak, but her eyes fixed on Nathan with something between gratitude and fear. Fear not for herself now, but for what might happen next. Nathan maintained his calm, even as he noticed the way Harrington's jaw tightened, the way his hand curled into a fist on the counter. She minded, Nathan said evenly. You just weren't paying attention. From the corner of his eye, Nathan saw the kitchen doors swing open. The cook, an older man with salt and pepper hair and forearms corded with muscle, stood watching, a spatula in his hand. He didn't approach, but his presence signaled awareness, a potential ally if things escalated. Harrington's eyes flickered to the cook, then back to Nathan. His face hardened, But something calculating entered his expression. "You seem to know a lot about what she's thinking," he said, his tone insinuating. "Friend of yours?" "Never met her before today," Nathan replied honestly. "But I know what respect looks like." And that wasn't it. The conversation had attracted attention now. An elderly couple at a nearby table watched openly. A woman with two young children glanced over, then deliberately turned back to her kids, keeping them focused on their food. The teenage busboy had stopped clearing a table, dish rag frozen mid-wipe. Harrington muttered something under his breath, the words too low to catch but the sentiment clear enough. He shoved his mug aside with enough force that coffee sloshed over the rim, spilling across the counter. He slapped a $20 bill down beside it, the gesture more about irritation than generosity. "Keep the change," he said to Rebecca, his tone making the words sound like a threat rather than a tip. "I'm sure your boyfriend here can help you clean up the mess." He stood, gathering his portfolio and straightening his jacket with a sharp tug. His eyes met Nathan's one last time, a cold assessment that promised this wasn't finished. "You know, I believe I've seen you on the Westridge site," he said, voice pitched low enough that only Nathan and Rebecca could hear. "Shame about those budget cuts coming. I hear they'll be letting people go next week." The threat hung in the air between them, explicit enough that Nathan felt its weight settle in his stomach. Harrington wasn't just some random customer. He was connected to Nathan's livelihood, to his ability to provide for Lily. The realization came with a cold spike of fear, but Nathan didn't let it show on his face. "I'm sure the crew would be interested to hear that directly from you," Nathan replied evenly. "Lot of families depending on that work." Something flickered across Harrington's face, annoyance at the subtle pushback. The bell over the diner door jingled harshly as he left, the sound carrying finality. Through the wide front windows, Nathan watched him climb into a sleek black Mercedes in the parking lot, the engine purring to life with expensive precision. Rebecca let out a slow, shaky breath as though she had been holding it for minutes. She gripped the counter for support, her knuckles pale from the tension. For the first time all morning, her smile faltered completely. No mask, no performance, just exhaustion and fragile relief. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling. Her eyes flickered to where Harrington had been sitting, then back to Nathan. "No one's ever stepped in before. I thought I just had to deal with it." Nathan shook his head, his tone even but firm. "No one should have to deal with that, not ever." She blinked, her eyes glistening, and gave him the smallest nod of acknowledgement. "I should clean this up," she said, reaching for a cloth behind the counter to wipe up the spilled coffee. Her hands were steadier now, but Nathan could see the red marks on her wrist where Harrington's fingers had pressed. Across the diner, Lily sat in the booth, wide-eyed but smiling faintly, as if she had just watched her dad become exactly what she believed he was, someone who didn't look away. The moment the door closed behind Harrington, the diner seemed to exhale. Conversations resumed in low murmurs. The clink of cutlery against plates returned, and the jukebox hummed faintly again. But for Rebecca, the world didn't immediately snap back into place. She stood still for a moment, one hand braced against the counter as though giving herself permission to breathe. Nathan stayed nearby, not looming, not crowding her, just present. His expression carried no trace of triumph or bravado, only steady reassurance. Rebecca glanced at him, her lips parting as though searching for the right words. When they came, they were barely louder than the hum of the diner. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice more steady now. "He comes in every week, always sits in my section, always does that. His hands, his comments. The manager says he's friends with the owner, so we just have to be professional." Nathan felt a surge of anger at the unfairness of it, but kept his expression neutral. "He's not just a customer," he said quietly. "He's a developer. Works with my construction company." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. Did he really mean that? About the job cuts? Nathan shrugged, trying to appear more confident than he felt. "Hard to say. People like that, they throw their weight around, see what sticks. Either way, it doesn't change what needed to happen here." From across the room, Lily had been watching everything. She slid out of the booth and walked over, her small steps determined. She stopped beside Nathan, looking up at Rebecca with solemn eyes. "Are you okay now?" she asked, her voice clear and concerned in the way only children can manage, direct, without pretense. Rebecca's expression softened as she looked down at Lily. She crouched slightly to meet the girl's eye level. I am now, she said gently. Your dad helped me when I was scared. Lily nodded as though this information confirmed something she already knew about the world. My dad always helps people who are scared, she stated with absolute certainty. He says that's what brave really means. Not that you don't feel scared, but that you do the right thing anyway. Nathan felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't realized Lily had been listening so closely to the bedtime conversations about courage, had internalized his words so completely. Somehow, hearing them repeated back in her small voice made them more real, more binding. Rebecca smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time that morning. That's very wise, she said. Your dad must be a good teacher. Lily beamed, proud. He is. He teaches me lots of things, how to tie my shoes and count money and stand up to bullies. The simple equation of Harrington with the schoolyard bullies they had discussed made Nathan's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Lily's moral compass was so clear, so uncomplicated. She saw someone in trouble. She expected help to be given. No calculations about professional consequences or social awkwardness, just right and wrong. Rebecca straightened, brushing her hands against her apron. I should get back to work, she said, though her tone carried none of the tension from earlier. Thank you both. She turned to go, then paused, looking back at Nathan. What's your name? Nathan Coleman, he replied. And this is Lily. Rebecca nodded, committing the names to memory. I'm Rebecca Mitchell. I'll remember what you did today, Nathan Coleman. She gave them a final smile before heading toward another table where customers were signaling for service. Nathan and Lily returned to their booth, where their breakfast had gone cold. Nathan slid back into his seat, suddenly aware of the eyes of other patrons following him. Some looked away quickly when he noticed them, but others nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement. An elderly man in the corner booth raised his coffee mug in a small salute. The recognition was uncomfortable. Nathan had never sought attention, but there was something affirming in it too. A reminder that most people recognized right from wrong, even if they didn't always find the courage to act on it. Is she gonna be okay now, Daddy? Lily asked, picking up her fork and poking at her cold pancakes. Nathan considered the question carefully. I think so, at least for today. Sometimes people need to know they're not alone before they can stand up for themselves. Sometimes just one person seeing them makes all the difference. Lily nodded, absorbing this wisdom, like when Jenny was crying in the bathroom at school, and I went in to sit with her even though the other girls had all left. Exactly like that, Nathan confirmed, impressed again by how quickly she applied the principle to her own experience. That was brave of you. She grinned, pleased by the comparison. The cook appeared beside their table, carrying 2 fresh plates of pancakes. These ones are on the house, he said, his voice gruff but kind. Couldn't help noticing yours got cold while you were occupied. Nathan started to protest, aware of the extra expense to the diner, but the cook waved him off. Name's Frank, he said, setting down the plates. Been cooking here 20 years, and I've watched that guy harass every young waitress who's come through. Never been able to do anything about it because of the owner. About time someone called him on it. Frank glanced over his shoulder toward the kitchen, then leaned in slightly. Between you and me, I've been recording some of it. On my phone. Been trying to get enough to take to the owner, show him what's really happening. Maybe with your statement too, we could finally get something done about it. Nathan felt a surge of hope at the unexpected ally. Harrington might have connections, but he wasn't the only one building a case. I'd be happy to talk to the owner, he offered. Frank nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered face. Appreciate that. Enjoy your breakfast. Frank returned to the kitchen, his shoulders set with new purpose. Lily was already attacking her fresh pancakes, the morning's drama temporarily forgotten in the face of hot food. Nathan watched her for a moment, wondering what ripples today's events would create in their lives. Harrington's threat about the West Ridge project lingered in his mind. If the man had the influence he claimed, Nathan's job could be at risk. The thought of unemployment, of falling behind on the mortgage, of not being able to provide for Lily, it tightened his chest with anxiety. But as he looked across at his daughter, happily devouring Mickey Mouse-shaped pancakes, he knew he wouldn't have done anything differently. Some lessons were worth any price. Rebecca passed by their table again, dropping off the check. I took off the pancakes, she said quietly. Frank insisted. Nathan nodded his thanks, noticing the difference in her demeanor now. Shoulders straighter, voice steadier, eyes meeting his directly. The transformation was subtle but significant. That man, Harrington. Rebecca hesitated, then continued. He's on the town council too. Has a lot of pull around here. I don't want you to have trouble because of me. Nathan recognized the guilt in her voice, the worry that her problems had become his. Don't worry about that, he said firmly. Some things are more important than avoiding trouble. Rebecca's expression softened, a look of resolve replacing the guilt. I've been thinking about reporting him, she admitted. Not just to the owner. Formally, I've got documentation from the last 6 months. Times, dates, what he said, what he did. I wasn't sure anyone would believe me, or care. I believe you, Nathan said simply. I saw it with my own eyes. If you decide to report him, I'll back you up. Frank too, sounds like. Rebecca nodded, a new determination in her eyes. Maybe it's time. She straightened as if the decision itself had lightened a weight she'd been carrying. Thank you again, she said, more strength in her voice now. Both of you. She walked away, moving with more confidence than before, as if the simple act of being seen, of having her reality acknowledged, had restored something essential. Nathan watched her go, aware that something significant had shifted in the diner's atmosphere. Not just for Rebecca, but for everyone who had witnessed what happened. Lily finished her pancakes and wiped her mouth with exaggerated care, using her napkin properly this time. That was a good thing you did, Daddy, she said matter-of-factly. She looked scared, but now she's not. Nathan smiled at his daughter's simple summary of the complex situation. You helped too, you know. You saw what was happening. You didn't look away. Lily nodded, accepting this assessment of her role. Are we still going to the park? Nathan glanced at his watch. They had time before the hardware store opened, where he needed to price water heaters. The bills and adult responsibilities would wait an hour. We sure are, kiddo. Let's go fly that kite. He left cash on the table for their meal, making sure to include a generous tip. As they walked toward the door, he noticed Rebecca watching them from behind the counter. Their eyes met briefly, a silent communication passing between them. Acknowledgement of something changed, something important. The bell over the door jingled as they stepped out into the morning sunshine. Lily's small hand slipped into his, warm and trusting. Nathan squeezed it gently, grateful for her presence, for the way she saw the world with such clarity. Today had been about more than just standing up to a bully. It had been about showing his daughter that the values he taught her weren't just words. They were actions, choices made in difficult moments. As they walked to the car, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that today's confrontation would have consequences beyond this morning. Harrington wasn't the type to forget a public challenge. The Westridge project and Nathan's job might indeed be at risk. But looking down at Lily, swinging their joined hands between them, her face tilted up to the clear blue sky, he knew without doubt that he had made the right choice. Some lessons were worth any cost. And showing his daughter how to be brave in a world that often rewarded looking away, that was a lesson beyond price. Monday morning arrived with the harsh buzz of Nathan's alarm at 5:15 a.m. His hands slapped the clock with practiced precision, silencing it before it could wake Lily. The weekend's warmth had already faded, replaced by the weight of ordinary responsibilities. He dressed in the dark, work boots and heavy canvas pants, the uniform of men who built things with their hands. Lily's bedroom door was ajar, and Nathan paused there, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest beneath her space-themed comforter. These quiet moments before the world demanded his attention were precious. A father simply witnessing his daughter's peaceful sleep, her face soft in the dim glow of her nightlight. She'd need to be up for school in an hour, but he'd let her steal these final moments of rest. The kitchen was cold. Nathan moved through his morning ritual, coffee brewing, lunch being packed, a quick breakfast of toast and peanut butter eaten while standing at the counter. Mrs. Parker from next door would arrive at 6:30 to get Lily ready for school. The arrangement had been a godsend since Marie's death, an elderly neighbor needing purpose, a single father needing help. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, this patchwork family they'd assembled. From necessity, Nathan's truck grumbled to life in the driveway, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The radio hummed with the morning news as he drove to the West Ridge construction site. His mind wandered back to Saturday at the diner, to Rebecca's eyes meeting his across the counter, to Harrington's thinly veiled threat. He hadn't mentioned it to Lily afterward, had instead focused on flying kites and making the weekend as normal as possible. But the weight of it had settled in his stomach like a stone. The construction site sprawled across 8 acres of former farmland, skeletal frames of future luxury homes rising from churned earth. Nathan parked beside the site office, a double-wide trailer serving as command center for the project. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing everyone in unflattering paleness. His crew was already gathering, thermoses of coffee clutched in calloused hands, morning jokes exchanged in the shorthand of men who'd worked together for years. Martin Hayes, the project manager, beckoned Nathan into his office at the far end of the trailer. A tight space dominated by blueprints and schedules, it smelled of stale coffee and the faint must of too many damp workdays. "Coleman Good, I need to talk to you before everyone heads out." Martin gestured to the folding chair across from his cluttered desk. Nathan sat, recognizing the tension in Martin's posture, the way he shuffled papers without looking at them. Something was off. Had a call from the developer over the weekend. Martin's fingers drummed against his desk. Harrington Development. Know anything about that? The name hung in the air between them. Nathan kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. What about them? Martin leaned back, studying Nathan's face. James Harrington personally called to express concerns about our team leadership on this project. Said he had an unpleasant interaction with one of our foremen. You want to tell me what that's about? Nathan considered his options. Denial would be easiest. Claim Harrington was confused, mistaken about who he'd met. But lies had a way of complicating things, of snowballing until they buried you. I ran into him at Sunrise Diner on Saturday, Nathan admitted. He was harassing one of the waitresses, grabbing her wrist, making her uncomfortable. I stepped in. Martin's expression darkened. You stepped in with the developer who's paying for this entire project? The one who could shut us down with a phone call? Jesus, Nathan. The disapproval stung, but Nathan had expected it. He should have been careful when he saw that waitress's face. The uncomfortable awareness that Martin might have been right, that perhaps he should have looked away, should have prioritized his job, his ability to provide for Lily, pricked at him. But then he remembered Rebecca's eyes, the relief in them when someone finally noticed. He remembered Lily watching, learning. He was hurting her, Martin. Not being charming, not flirting, hurting her. The guy's a predator. Martin sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't need to know the details. What I need is for this project to continue without complications. Harrington's talking about switching contractors if we don't make personnel changes. The implication was clear. Nathan was the personnel change Harrington wanted. So that's it? Nathan felt heat rising in his chest. He gets to behave however he wants because he has money. We just look the other way. Martin slammed his hand on the desk, coffee mugs rattling with the impact. This isn't about right and wrong, Coleman. This is about 30 men with families to feed. This is about the company staying afloat in a market that's already tight. You think your principals pay mortgages? The words hit their mark. Nathan thought of Lily, of the water heater that still needed replacing, of college funds not yet started. He thought of his crew, men with their own children, their own responsibilities. The weight of it pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. Martin's voice softened, seeing the impact of his words. Look, I get it. The guy's an ass, but this is business, not personal. I need you to make this right. What exactly are you asking me to do? Nathan's voice was quiet, controlled. Martin wouldn't meet his eyes. Apologize to Harrington. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Whatever it takes to smooth this over. The request hung between them, a test of priorities. Nathan stood slowly, his decision solidifying. I can't do that, Martin. I won't. Martin's face hardened. Then I can't keep you on Westridge. I'm moving you to the Hamilton Street renovation. It's a pay cut, and it's across town, but it's the best I can do. The Hamilton Street project was a small-scale renovation of an old office building, a demotion in both status and pay. Nathan calculated quickly. It would mean at least a 20% reduction in his paycheck, maybe more with fewer overtime opportunities. His stomach tightened at the thought. "You're punishing me for doing the right thing," Nathan said, the words bitter on his tongue. Martin stood, matching Nathan's posture. "I'm saving your job, Coleman. You should be thanking me. Most bosses would have fired you outright." He held out a folder with the Hamilton Street details. "Take it or leave it. Your choice." Nathan took the folder, the weight of it in his hands a physical reminder of consequences. For a brief, wild moment, he considered walking out, telling Martin exactly what he thought of a company that prioritized appeasing abusive clients over standing up for what was right. But reality anchored him. Lily needed stability, needed a father who could provide. "I'll take it," he said finally, the words tasting like surrender. The drive to the Hamilton Street site was longer, the traffic heavier than his usual route. Nathan called Mrs. Parker, explaining he'd be home later than usual. Her cheerful assurance that she could stay with Lily as long as needed only deepened his guilt. One more person stepping in to fill the gaps his choices created. The Hamilton Street building was a 3-story brick structure from the 1940s, its facade weathered but dignified. The renovation was straightforward, updating electrical, plumbing, bringing the interior into the current century while preserving its historical character. In normal circumstances, Nathan would have appreciated the craftsmanship required, the balance of preservation and progress. Today, it just felt like a step backward. The crew was smaller, just 8 men compared to the 20 at Westridge. They eyed Nathan with curiosity as Martin introduced him as their new foreman, the abruptness of the change raising questions no one asked aloud. Nathan recognized their wariness. Construction crews functioned on established hierarchies, on trust built over time. He was an outsider, and they had no reason yet to follow his lead. By noon, the rhythms of work had eased some of the tension. Nathan found comfort in the familiar tasks, measuring, cutting, the solid weight of tools in his hands. Physical labor had always been his refuge, the one place where problems had clear solutions, where effort directly translated to results. Here, at least, the rules made sense. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from an unknown number. "It's Rebecca from Sunrise Diner. Frank gave me your number. Can we talk? It's important." Nathan stared at the message, surprise mingling with concern. He stepped away from the crew, finding a quiet corner to reply. "Everything okay?" The response came quickly. "Not really. Harrington came back to the diner, made a scene. Manager fired me this morning, said I was causing problems with valued customers." The injustice of it hit Nathan like a physical blow. He'd stepped in to help, and now Rebecca had lost her job because of it. His intervention, meant to protect, had instead made things worse. Guilt coiled in his stomach, sharp and insistent. "I'm sorry," he typed, the words inadequate against what had happened. "Where are you now?" "Home. Trying to figure out what to do next. Frank suggested I talk to you. Said you might know what to do about Harrington." Nathan leaned against the brick wall, running a hand through his hair. What did Frank think he could do? He'd already lost his position at Westridge, taken a pay cut, damaged his professional reputation. And for what? Harrington was still throwing his weight around, still hurting people. "I'll help if I can," he wrote finally, "but I'm not sure what options we have." Rebecca's response was immediate. "I have documentation, 6 months of incidents, times, dates, witnesses. Frank has videos. We're not the only ones he's hurt." Nathan stared at the words, their implications expanding in his mind. This wasn't just about one waitress, one incident. This was pattern behavior, the kind that suggested Harrington had been getting away with this for years. The kind that might actually matter if brought to light. "Let me think about this," he typed. "I'll call you after work." The rest of the day passed in a fog of distraction. Nathan went through the motions of his job, directing the crew, solving problems as they arose. But his mind kept circling back to Rebecca's texts, to the larger picture forming around Harrington's behavior. By the time he pulled into his driveway that evening, a plan was taking shape. Not fully formed, but the beginnings of something that might make a difference. Lily met him at the door, launching herself into his arms with the unrestrained enthusiasm of a 7-year-old. Her school backpack lay open on the kitchen table, homework half completed beside a plate of cookies Mrs. Parker had clearly provided. "You're late, Daddy." Lily's accusation carried no real heat, just the honest observation of a child whose routine had been disrupted. We're having spaghetti for dinner. I helped Mrs. Parker make the sauce. Nathan set her down, forcing a smile despite his exhaustion. Sorry, kiddo. New job site is farther away. Might be like this for a while. Lily's brow furrowed, processing this change. Every day? For now, Nathan confirmed, hating the uncertainty in his voice. We'll figure it out. Mrs. Parker appeared from the living room, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her cardigan buttoned despite the warmth of the house. She's been an angel, Nathan. Did all her spelling practice without a single complaint. The older woman gathered her purse, preparing to leave. Nathan walked her to the door, thanking her with the awkward gratitude of someone who needed more help than they were comfortable accepting. It's no trouble at all, she assured him, patting his arm. That little girl is the highlight of my day. She hesitated, then added, Everything all right? You seem troubled. Nathan considered deflecting, offering the polite fiction that everything was fine. But Mrs. Parker had been there through Marie's illness, through the darkest days after her death. She had earned honesty. Work complications, he admitted. Had to switch job sites. It's a longer commute, less pay. And there's something else I might need to get involved in, something important. Mrs. Parker studied his face, her eyes sharp despite her age. Whatever it is, you'll do the right thing. You always do. She squeezed his arm gently. And don't worry about Lily. I can stay later. Come earlier. Whatever you need. The simple faith in her words loosened something in Nathan's chest. Thank you. That means more than you know. After dinner and Lily's bedtime routine, the bath, the story, the negotiations for just 5 more minutes that Nathan always pretended to consider before saying no, he sat at the kitchen table with his phone. Rebecca had texted her address, a small apartment complex on the east side of town. They'd agreed to meet the following evening to discuss options. Nathan stared at the monthly budget spreadsheet on his laptop, adjusting figures to account for his reduced salary. The numbers refused to cooperate, expenses stubbornly exceeding income no matter how he shuffled them. The water heater would have to wait. So would the new shoes Lily needed for spring. So would the emergency fund he'd been trying to build. The cushion against unexpected disasters. Was this the price of doing the right thing? This slow erosion of security, this constant recalculation of what could be sacrificed? Nathan closed the laptop, too tired to wrestle with it further. Tomorrow would be soon enough to figure out how to make ends meet. The next day passed in a blur of construction, tasks, and crew management. Nathan was beginning to learn the rhythms of the Hamilton Street team, their strengths and weaknesses, the particular dynamics that govern their interactions. They were warming to him, responding to his straightforward approach and willingness to work alongside them rather than just direct from a distance. By 6 o'clock, Nathan had dropped Lily at Mrs. Parker's for the evening and was navigating to Rebecca's apartment. The complex was modest but well-maintained, red brick buildings arranged around small courtyards with patches of grass and the occasional struggling tree. Rebecca met him at the door of Unit 14B, her appearance markedly different from the diner. Gone was the uniform, replaced by jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her hair, freed from its practical ponytail, fell to her shoulders. She looked younger, but also more tired, the shadows under her eyes speaking of restless nights. Thanks for coming, she said, stepping back to let him enter. Frank should be here soon. He's bringing the videos. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom with minimal furnishings. Textbooks were stacked on the coffee table. Nursing school materials, Nathan realized, remembering what she'd mentioned at the diner. A corkboard on the wall held a schedule grid, work shifts carefully coordinated around class times. A life meticulously planned, now thrown into disarray. I'm sorry about your job, Nathan said, taking the seat she offered on a worn but clean sofa. If I hadn't stepped in, Rebecca cut him off with a firm shake of her head. Don't apologize for doing the right thing. Harrington would have kept pushing boundaries until... She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Things could have gotten much worse. She moved to the kitchen table where a folder lay open, papers organized in neat stacks. This is everything, she explained, gesturing for him to join her. 6 months of documentation. Every incident, every comment, every time he touched me or another server without permission. Dates, times of witnesses. Nathan paged through the meticulous records, his stomach tightening with each entry. The pattern was unmistakable. Escalating behavior, testing boundaries, using his position and influence to silence complaints. Notations indicated which managers had been informed, what actions, if any, had been taken. Most entries ended with some version of no action taken, or customer is friends with owner. You kept all this even though no one was helping? Nathan asked, impressed by her persistence in the face of institutional indifference. Rebecca's expression hardened. I learned from last time. I used to waitress at the grill on Maple Street. There was a regular there too. Started the same way. Comments, touches. When I complained, the manager said I was overreacting. When I kept complaining, I was let go for performance issues. She straightened a stack of papers with precise movements. I promised myself next time I'd have proof. A knock at the door announced Frank's arrival. The cook looked different out of his kitchen whites, less authoritative, but no less determined. He carried a tablet, already queued up with video files. Got everything, he announced, settling at the table with them. Been recording for months whenever that bastard came in. Kitchen has a good view of the counter. The videos were damning. Harrington's behavior caught in unambiguous detail. The way he cornered female servers, the unwanted touches, the obvious discomfort of the women trying to maintain professionalism while creating distance. Frank had captured Nathan's intervention as well, the confrontation playing out from a different angle than Nathan had experienced it. This is more than enough for a complaint, Nathan observed, impressed by their thoroughness. Have you thought about where to take it? Rebecca and Frank exchanged glances. That's why we wanted to talk to you, Rebecca explained. Harrington's on the town council. He plays golf with the police chief. And he owns half the commercial property downtown, including the building the diner's in. We need someone who knows how to handle this right. Nathan felt the weight of their expectation, their assumption that he had connections or knowledge they lacked. But the truth was simpler and harder. He was just a construction foreman, a single father trying to keep his head above water. His confrontation with Harrington had been instinct, not strategy. I want to help, he said carefully, but I don't have any special influence. I'm actually in hot water at work because of what happened at the diner. Got reassigned to a smaller project, took a pay cut. Rebecca's face fell, guilt flashing across her features. I didn't know, I'm sorry. Not your fault, Nathan assured her. My choice, my consequences. I'd do it again. He paused, thinking, but maybe we don't need influence. Maybe we just need the right audience. Frank leaned forward, interest piqued. What are you thinking? The town council, Nathan suggested. They have public meetings, right? Citizens can speak. What if we presented this documentation there, in public? Harrington couldn't sweep it under the rug if it was out in the open. Rebecca paled slightly. You mean stand up in front of everyone? Tell what happened. Nathan recognized the fear in her voice, the natural hesitation of someone being asked to make themselves vulnerable, to relive trauma in a public forum. I know it's asking a lot, he acknowledged, but think about it. Harrington has power because he operates in private. He counts on silence, on people being too afraid or too ashamed to speak up. Frank nodded slowly, catching the vision. Public pressure, hard for the council to ignore if it's right in front of them. And if we get others to come forward too? There are others, Nathan asked, though he wasn't surprised. Frank's expression darkened. At least 5 former servers I know of. All quit or got fired after incidents with Harrington. I've stayed at the diner so long, I've seen the pattern repeat. Rebecca was quiet, considering the implications. I'd have to find another job first, she said finally. Somewhere Harrington can't touch. And we'd need to be prepared for him to fight back. Nathan thought of his own situation. The demotion, the pay cut, the tightening of his budget. Harrington had already demonstrated his willingness to use his influence to punish those who crossed him. Going public would escalate the conflict, potentially putting them all at greater risk. He has a lot of power in this town, Nathan warned. We should be clear about what we're getting into. Frank snorted, dismissive. Power isn't the same as being right, and he's not the only one with connections in Millwood. I've lived here 40 years, know a lot of people who are sick of Harrington thinking he owns the place. The conviction in Frank's voice was steadying. Perhaps they weren't as outmatched as it initially seemed. Millwood was still a community, and communities had their own kind of power when properly mobilized. The next steps took shape quickly. Rebecca would seek employment outside Harrington's sphere of influence. Frank would reach out to former employees who might be willing to share their experiences, and Nathan would research the town council procedures, determining the best approach for bringing their concerns forward. They agreed to meet again in a week to assess their progress. As Nathan drove home, his mind raced with both possibilities and concerns. He was diving deeper into a conflict that had already cost him professionally. The responsible thing, the practical thing, would be to step back, to focus on adjusting to his new financial reality, on providing stability for Lily. But something Rebecca had said kept echoing in his thoughts. Don't apologize for doing the right thing. Mrs. Parker was reading in his living room when he arrived, Lily already asleep. The older woman looked up from her book, her expression questioning. Everything all right? You were gone a while. Nathan sank into the chair opposite her, suddenly aware of how tired he was. Yes and no, he admitted. I'm getting involved in something complicated, something that might make waves in town. He explained the situation briefly. Harrington's behavior, Rebecca's firing, their plan to bring the issue to the town council. Mrs. Parker listened without interruption, her weathered hands folded neatly in her lap. When he finished, she nodded slowly. Marie would be proud of you, she said simply, standing up for people who need it. That's who she fell in love with. The mention of his late wife sent a familiar pang through Nathan's chest. He often wondered what Marie would think of his parenting, of the decisions he made in her absence. The idea that she would approve of this path, despite its complications, eased something inside him. But what about Lily, he asked, voicing his deepest concern. If this goes badly, if I lose more work or make enemies in town. Mrs. Parker fixed him with a steady gaze. What are you teaching Lily when you stand up for what's right, even when it's hard? And what would you teach her if you walked away? The question cut to the heart of the matter. Nathan had always tried to instill values in his daughter: honesty, kindness, courage. How could he expect those lessons to take root if she saw him abandon them when they became inconvenient? You're right, he acknowledged. I need to see this through. Mrs. Parker patted his hand, her touch comforting in its familiarity. And you're not alone, Nathan. Don't forget that. The following days fell into a new pattern. Nathan would rise before dawn, work his shift at Hamilton Street, then spend evenings either with Lily or meeting with Rebecca and Frank to develop their strategy. They learned that the next town council meeting was 3 weeks away, enough time to gather more evidence and prepare their presentation. Frank proved to be remarkably well connected for a diner cook. He'd lived in Millwood his entire life, had watched it grow from a sleepy agricultural community to a developing suburb. People knew him, trusted him, and responded to his quiet inquiries about Harrington with surprising candor. By their third meeting, they had statements from 3 additional women who had experienced harassment from Harrington. One had worked at the diner 2 years prior, another at a retail shop Harrington owned, and the third had been an intern at his development company. Each story followed the same pattern. Inappropriate comments escalating to unwanted touching, complaints ignored or punished, the women eventually leaving their positions rather than enduring continued harassment. Rebecca had secured a new job at a medical office on the outskirts of town, assisting with patient intake while she continued her nursing studies. The position paid slightly less than the diner, but offered regular hours and a professional environment far from Harrington's influence. It's not waitressing, but it's actually better experience for nursing, she explained during their meeting at Frank's small house near the high school. And my boss knows about the situation with Harrington. She's supportive. That's good, Nathan said, genuinely relieved. One less vulnerability in their position. Frank had laid out the town council meeting procedures. Citizens could speak for up to 3 minutes during the public comment period. They would need to be concise, impactful, and prepared for potential pushback. I'll speak first, Frank suggested. Been in this town longest, know most of the council members. Can set the stage before Rebecca shares her experience. They turned to Nathan, expectation in their expressions. We thought you could speak third, Rebecca said. Talk about what you witnessed, how management responded when you tried to help. A perspective from someone without a personal grievance against Harrington. Nathan nodded, accepting the role. He'd been preparing mentally for this, crafting what he would say, how he would present the facts without allowing emotion to overwhelm the message. But a new concern had been growing in his mind, one he needed to voice. "We should be prepared for Harrington to fight back," he warned. "He's already shown he's willing to use his influence against me at work. He'll do the same to all of us if he can." Rebecca's expression hardened with resolve. "Let him try. I've already lost one job because of him. I'm not backing down now." Frank nodded agreement. "Some things are worth the risk. This town's been letting men like Harrington have their way for too long. Time that changed." Their conviction was steadying, a reminder that this wasn't just about one incident or one person. It was about challenging a system that protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable, about creating consequences where there had been none. As Nathan drove home that night, his phone rang, Martin's number flashing on the screen. He answered with a sense of foreboding, wondering if more professional repercussions were coming. "Coleman, we've got a situation at Hamilton Street," Martin said without preamble. "City inspector came by today, flagged a bunch of code violations we didn't know about. Projects shut down until they're addressed." Nathan frowned, confused. They'd been following the approved plans exactly, had passed all previous inspections without issue. "What violations? Everything was up to code as of last week." Martin's sigh carried through the phone, heavy with frustration. "I don't know, man. It doesn't make sense. But we're looking at least 2 weeks of stoppage while we sort it out. I've got to put your crew on furlough, paid leave for now, but if this drags on," the implication was clear. If the shutdown continued, the pay would stop. Nathan's grip tightened on the steering wheel, the sudden financial uncertainty hitting him like a physical blow. 2 weeks without work was a major setback, especially coming on the heels of his pay reduction. "This isn't random," Nathan said, the pieces connecting in his mind. "Harrington's behind this. He's on the town council, probably has influence with the building department." Martin was quiet for a moment, the silence damning. "Look, Nathan, I don't know what's going on between you and Harrington. I don't want to know. But whatever it is, fix it. The company can't afford to be caught in the middle." The conversation ended with no resolution, just the heavy weight of another consequence. Nathan sat in his parked truck outside his house, trying to process this new development. Harrington was escalating, using his influence to target not just Nathan, but the entire Hamilton Street crew. Innocent men with families of support were now caught in the crossfire of a conflict they knew nothing about. Nathan entered his house quietly, finding Mrs. Parker asleep in the armchair, a mystery novel open on her lap. He gently woke her, thanking her for staying late. She studied his face with concern, clearly reading the tension there, but didn't press for details. Some burdens weren't meant to be shared, especially not with those who already gave so much. After she left, Nathan sat at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Lily's breathing through the baby monitor. He still kept on, more for his comfort than hers. The financial realities stared back at him from his laptop screen. 2 weeks without pay would deplete his meager savings, would mean difficult choices about which bills to pay and which to defer. The responsible thing, the fatherly thing, would be to back down, to call Harrington, to apologize as Martin had suggested, to extract himself from Rebecca and Frank's campaign, to prioritize his ability to provide for Lily above all else. But as he considered this path, Lily's voice echoed in his memory. "My dad always helps people who are scared." The simple faith in her words, the certainty that her father would do the right thing even when it was difficult, it was both a comfort and a challenge. What kind of example would he set if he abandoned his principles when they became costly? Nathan closed the laptop, his decision solidifying. He would continue supporting Rebecca and Frank. He would speak at the town council meeting. But he would also need to find a way to weather this financial storm, to insulate Lily from the consequences of his choices. Tomorrow he would look for temporary work to fill the gap. Day labor, weekend jobs, whatever it took to keep them afloat until the Hamilton Street project resumed. The morning brought no clarity, only the practical demands of parenthood, making Lily's breakfast, checking her homework, ensuring she had everything needed for school. He didn't mention the work stoppage, didn't want to burden her with adult concerns. Instead, he focused on maintaining normalcy, on being present in the moments they shared before Mrs. Parker arrived to walk Lily to the bus stop. Once alone, Nathan began making calls. Construction was his primary skill, but he was willing to consider any opportunity that would generate income during the shutdown. By noon, he had lined up three possibilities: a weekend framing job for a friend's garage addition, some maintenance work at the local community center, and a potential position helping a contractor with bathroom renovations. It wouldn't replace his regular income, but it might be enough to keep the bills paid until the Hamilton Street project resumed. Nathan felt a grim satisfaction in having solutions, in not being completely vulnerable to Harrington's machinations. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Meeting tonight? Have updates." Nathan confirmed, grateful for the distraction of forward movement. Whatever Harrington's next move might be, they would face it together, with a growing coalition of support behind them. The thought steadied him, a reminder that even in this uneven contest, they weren't powerless. Sometimes courage was simply refusing to be silenced, regardless of the consequences. That evening, their small group gathered around Frank's kitchen table, the familiar setting lending a sense of purpose to their meeting. Rebecca arrived with news. She had connected with a reporter from the local newspaper who was interested in their story. "She wants to interview all of us," Rebecca explained, excitement coloring her voice. "Says there might be a pattern of Harrington using his position to punish people who cross him. Not just harassment, but potentially abusing his position on the town council." Nathan shared his own update: the sudden shutdown of the Hamilton Street project, the suspicious timing, the impact on his crew. Frank nodded grimly, unsurprised. "He's escalating," Frank observed. "Means we're a real threat. He wouldn't bother if he wasn't worried." The realization was both encouraging and sobering. They were making progress, building a case that Harrington couldn't easily dismiss. But his response suggested he would use every tool at his disposal to fight back, regardless of who got caught in the crossfire. As they continued planning, detailing their approach for the upcoming council meeting, Nathan found himself thinking about Lily, about the world she was growing up in, and the people who shaped it, about the kind of community he wanted for her. One where the powerful were held accountable, where standing up for others wasn't punished, but celebrated. The path ahead would be difficult, the costs real. But sitting there with Rebecca and Frank, with their growing alliance of support, Nathan felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Not just that they might succeed in holding Harrington accountable, but that in doing so they might create ripples that extended far beyond this one situation. A man's character shows in how he treats those with less power, Nathan thought, the words forming in his mind with unexpected clarity. And a community's character shows in whether it allows that treatment to continue. As the meeting concluded, Rebecca touched his arm lightly, her expression serious. "Are you sure you want to stay involved? With your job on hold, with Lily to think about, no one would blame you for stepping back." Nathan considered the question, giving it the weight it deserved. Then he shook his head, certainty settling over him like a familiar coat. "Some things matter more than playing it safe," he said quietly. "And I want my daughter to grow up in a town where people stand up for what's right, even when it costs them something. Especially then." The words hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Rebecca nodded, understanding reflected in her eyes. Behind her, Frank watched with quiet approval, the ghost of a smile touching his weathered face. Whatever came next, whatever Harrington threw at them, whatever price they paid for standing firm, they would face it together, not because it was easy or safe, but because it was necessary. Because sometimes the measure of a life wasn't found in what you gained, but in what you refused to compromise. The town council chambers weren't designed to hold standing room-only crowds. The modest space with its wood-paneled walls and uncomfortable folding chairs typically hosted a sparse handful of citizens, mostly retirees with time to monitor local government. Tonight was different. Bodies packed every available inch, spilling into the hallway, a low murmur of anticipation humming through the air like electricity before a storm. Nathan adjusted his tie, a rarely worn accessory that felt like a noose against his throat. 2 weeks had passed since the Hamilton Street project shut down. 14 days of cobbling together odd jobs and watching his savings dwindle. The weight of financial pressure sat heavy on his shoulders as he scanned the crowd for familiar faces. Rebecca stood near the front, her posture straight, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She'd chosen a simple blue blouse and black slacks, professional attire that spoke of seriousness rather than seeking attention. The medical office job had already changed her, a subtle confidence in her reckoning that hadn't been there before. Beside her, Frank leaned against the wall, his weathered face impassive save for the determined set of his jaw. What Nathan hadn't expected was the turnout. Word had spread through Millwood's interconnected web of relationships. The newspaper article had run 3 days earlier, a front-page story detailing multiple allegations against James Harrington. The reporter had done her job thoroughly, connecting dots beyond harassment to suggest patterns of using political influence for personal vendettas. The public response had been immediate and fierce. Lily tugged at Nathan's hand, her small fingers warm against his palm. "Why are there so many people, Daddy?" He crouched to her level, adjusting the ribbon in her hair that had come loose during the drive. They came to support Miss Rebecca and the others. "Remember how I told you sometimes doing the right thing is hard, but it's important that people stand together?" Lily nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson as only children can, not just the words, but the weight behind them. Mrs. Parker waved from several rows back, having insisted on coming to see justice done, despite Nathan's concerns about the potentially tense atmosphere. She patted the seat beside her, offering to watch Lily during the proceedings. The council members filed in, 7 men and women in business attire, their expressions varying from curiosity to discomfort as they noted the unprecedented crowd. Mayor Wilson, a silver-haired woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of her gavel. The routine matters of local governance, approving minutes, reviewing budget amendments, proceeded with unusual efficiency, everyone aware of why the crowd had really gathered. James Harrington sat at the end of the council table, his expensive suit and carefully styled hair marking him as different from his more modestly attired colleagues. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man unaccustomed to consequences, occasionally checking his watch as if the proceedings were merely an inconvenience in his busy schedule. He hadn't yet acknowledged Nathan's presence, though his gaze had swept the room several times, cataloging faces, assessing threats. "We'll now open the floor for public comment," Mayor Wilson announced, consulting her notes. "Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record." Frank stepped forward first, as they'd planned. His weathered hands gripped the podium, knuckles whitening under the fluorescent lights. "Frank Moretti, 1422, Oakwood Drive. I've lived in Millwood for 42 years. Been cooking at Sunrise Diner for 20 of those." His voice, normally gruff, carried a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "I'm here about James Harrington and his treatment of women in our town." The room went completely still. Even the usual shuffling of papers and whispered comments ceased as Frank methodically described what he'd witnessed. The pattern of harassment, the escalating behaviors, management's failure to intervene. He named dates, incidents, victims. Each detail landed with the precision of a nail being driven home, constructing an undeniable reality. Nathan watched Harrington's face, observing the subtle shifts in his expression, from dismissive to annoyed to increasingly wary as Frank's testimony continued. When Frank mentioned the videos, a muscle twitched in Harrington's jaw, the first crack in his composed facade. "Before my time is up," Frank concluded, "I want to ask this council a simple question. How many women need to be hurt before someone with power in this town says enough?" The question hung in the air as Frank returned to his place against the wall. Mayor Wilson, visibly disturbed by his testimony, called the next speaker. Rebecca Mitchell. Rebecca approached the podium with measured steps. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone, but her voice emerged steady and clear. "Rebecca Mitchell, 1750, Aspen Court, apartment 14B. Until 2 weeks ago, I was a server at Sunrise Diner. I was fired after James Harrington complained about me to management. What followed was a first-hand account that silenced even the restless shifting of the crowd. Rebecca detailed 6 months of escalating behavior. Unwanted touches, inappropriate comments, instances where Harrington had used his physical presence to corner her in the workplace. She described reporting the behavior to managers, only to be told Harrington was a valued customer who knew the owner. When I expressed concerns about my safety, Rebecca's voice caught momentarily before strengthening again. I was told to be professional and handle it. When another customer finally intervened after witnessing Mr. Harrington grab my wrist, I was the one who lost my job. From the back of the room, someone muttered, "Disgraceful." The sentiment rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Rebecca lifted her chin, something fierce entering her expression. I'm not the first woman James Harrington has harassed. I'm not even the 10th. She gestured to several women standing along the wall, each nodding in somber confirmation. We've all experienced the same pattern. We've all been silenced by the same fear, that speaking up would cost us jobs we couldn't afford to lose, references we needed, positions in a community where one man has too much power. Harrington leaned over to whisper something to the council member beside him, his expression dismissive. The gesture wasn't lost on the crowd. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the room. Thank you for your time, Rebecca concluded, her gaze sweeping across the council members, lingering briefly on Harrington before returning to her seat. Mayor Wilson consulted her list. Nathan Coleman. Nathan moved to the podium, acutely aware of Lily watching from her seat beside Mrs. Parker. His pulse quickened, not from fear of public speaking, but from the weight of what was at stake, not just for Rebecca or the other women, but for the kind of community his daughter would grow up in. Nathan Coleman, 47 Pine Ridge Drive. I'm a construction foreman with Coleman Construction. His voice projected clearly, the same tone he used on job sites to be heard over machinery. On March 16th, I was having breakfast with my 7-year-old daughter at Sunrise Diner when I witnessed James Harrington harassing Rebecca Mitchell. The harassment wasn't subtle or ambiguous. He repeatedly touched her without consent, cornered her physically, and created a situation where she was visibly afraid. Nathan described the scene in detail. Rebecca's attempts to maintain professionalism while creating distance, Harrington's escalating behavior, the moment his daughter had noticed something wrong. He emphasized how obvious the distress had been, clear enough that even a child could recognize it. When I intervened, Nathan continued, Mr. Harrington threatened me professionally. 3 days later, I was removed from my position as foreman at Westridge Homes, a development project he's involved with, and reassigned to a lower-paying job. 2 weeks ago, that project was suddenly shut down after a surprise inspection found code violations that previous inspections hadn't identified. Murmurs swept through the crowd as connections formed. The newspaper article had mentioned similar patterns of regulatory pressure applied to Harrington's opponents. Nathan gripped the edges of the podium, his next words measured and deliberate. I understand business. I understand the importance of development in our town. What I don't understand is why we've allowed one person's money and influence to put them above basic human decency and the law. Harrington's face had darkened, his practiced calm cracking around the edges. He scribbled something on a notepad, sliding it toward the council member beside him, who frowned and subtly pushed it back. My daughter asked me something after that morning at the diner, Nathan said, his voice softening slightly. She asked why the other grown-ups didn't help when they could see someone was scared. I didn't have a good answer for her then. He paused, letting the implications sink in. I'm hoping this council will give me a better one tonight. As Nathan returned to his seat, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had begun as concern had crystallized into something more potent. Collective indignation, a community recognizing its own complicity through silence. For the next hour, speakers approached the podium one after another. Former employees of Harrington's companies described similar experiences of harassment. A retired building inspector detailed instances where permits had been unexpectedly expedited or delayed based on personal relationships rather than code compliance. The owner of a small business recounted losing a prime retail lease after declining Harrington's unwanted advances. Each testimony built upon the last, creating a comprehensive picture not just of harassment, but of systemic abuse of power. The portrait that emerged was of a man who had operated unchecked for years, protected by wealth, connections, and the community's unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Harrington's composure had completely eroded by the time Mayor Wilson finally addressed him directly. Councilmember Harrington, these are serious allegations. Would you like to respond? Harrington straightened his tie, a practiced smile sliding into place as he surveyed the room. This is clearly a coordinated attack on my character and business interests, he began, his tone suggesting mild amusement rather than concern. A group of disgruntled former employees, led by a construction worker with a personal grudge, have manufactured these claims to damage my reputation. The dismissive characterization sent a ripple of tension through the audience. Nathan felt his jaw tighten, but remained silent, trusting the process they had initiated. As for the specific allegations, Harrington continued, I categorically deny any inappropriate behavior. I'm a businessman who has contributed significantly to Millwood's growth. These accusations are not only false, but defamatory. His gaze settled on Rebecca briefly. If certain individuals found normal workplace interactions threatening, perhaps they should consider careers with less public contact. The victim-blaming strategy landed poorly. Even council members who had seemed neutral were now frowning, glancing at the documentation folders Rebecca had provided earlier. Councilmember Davis, a gray-haired man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. Mr. Harrington, we have sworn statements from 17 women spanning a 15-year period. We have video evidence. We have corroborating witnesses. Are you suggesting all of these people are lying? Harrington's smile tightened. I'm suggesting that perception is subjective, and that in today's climate, normal interactions are often mischaracterized for personal gain or attention. The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Mayor Wilson rapped her gavel, restoring order before addressing the council. Given the serious nature of these allegations, I believe we need to take immediate action. I move that we form an independent investigative committee to review all evidence and determine appropriate consequences, including potential removal from the council. The motion was seconded immediately. Harrington's face flushed with anger. The mask of composure completely dropped. This is a witch hunt, he snapped, standing abruptly. You have no grounds for removal based on unsubstantiated personal accusations. Councilmember Davis removed his glasses, fixing Harrington with a steady gaze. Actually, James, the town charter is quite clear. Conduct unbecoming a public official is absolutely grounds for removal. And I'd say the evidence presented tonight more than meets that standard. The vote was unanimous, with Harrington forced to abstain. An investigative committee would be formed, with findings due within 30 days. Additionally, the town's legal counsel would review whether criminal charges might be appropriate for some of the more serious allegations. As the meeting adjourned, the crowd dispersed slowly, clusters of people talking in low, intense conversations. Rebecca was surrounded by supporters, including several of the women who had testified. Frank stood nearby, fielding questions from the local reporter who had broken the story. Nathan gathered Lily from Mrs. Parker, thanking the older woman for her support. Are we going home now, Daddy? Lily asked, stifling a yawn. It had been a long evening for a 7-year-old. Just a minute, sweetheart. Nathan caught Rebecca's eye across the room, giving her a small nod of acknowledgement. She extracted herself from her group and made her way over to them. You did it, Nathan said simply. We all did. Rebecca smiled, the exhaustion and relief evident in her face. It's just the beginning. The investigation, the potential charges. It could be months before there's real resolution. But he can't hurt anyone else in the meantime, Nathan pointed out. And people know the truth now. That matters. Rebecca crouched to Lily's level, her expression softening. Thank you for sharing your dad with us tonight, she said gently. He helped a lot of people by being brave. Lily beamed with pride, leaning against Nathan's leg. My dad is the bravest, she declared with absolute certainty. Even braver than Captain America, because real brave is scarier than pretend brave. The simple wisdom brought smiles to both adults' faces. From the mouths of babes, Rebecca murmured, straightening up. She's right, you know. What you risked, your body, though, your reputation, that's real courage. It's real. Nathan shook his head slightly, uncomfortable with the praise. Just did what anyone should have done. The credit belongs to you and the others who came forward. That took more courage than anything I did. They were interrupted by Frank, who approached with purpose in his stride. Got a minute? He asked Nathan. There's someone you should meet. Frank led them to where a stocky man in his 50s stood conversing with the reporter. Nathan recognized him vaguely but couldn't place the face. Mike Bennett, owner of Bennett Construction, Frank introduced. Mike, this is Nathan Coleman. Bennett extended a calloused hand, his grip firm and assessing, the handshake of someone who'd spent decades in the trades before moving to management. Heard a lot about you tonight, Coleman. Frank tells me you're a damn good foreman. Nathan accepted the handshake, curiosity mixing with cautious hope. I try to be. Bennett got straight to the point, a trait Nathan appreciated. I've got a commercial project breaking ground next month. Shopping center on the east side. Needs someone who knows how to run a crew and doesn't cut corners. Frank says that's you. The unexpected opportunity landed like a life raft after weeks of treading water. Nathan felt a surge of gratitude toward Frank, who stood by with poorly concealed satisfaction. I'd be interested, Nathan confirmed, careful not to seem too eager despite the financial pressure of recent weeks. Could I ask why you're approaching me specifically? Bennett's weathered face creased in a wry smile. Two reasons. First, anyone Harrington tried to run out of town is probably someone with integrity. I like that in a foreman. Second, he gestured toward the emptying council chambers. You just demonstrated you're willing to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you. That's the kind of leadership that builds more than just structures. The simplicity of the assessment, that what had felt like professional suicide might actually be valued by others, caught Nathan off guard. He glanced at Lily, who was fighting to keep her eyes open despite the late hour, then back at Bennett. I'd like to hear more about the project. Cards were exchanged, a meeting scheduled for the following day. As Bennett moved away to speak with others, Frank clapped Nathan on the shoulder, his expression satisfied. Told you Harrington wasn't the only one with connections in this town. Nathan's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Thank you. For everything. Frank dismissed the gratitude with a gruff wave. Just like you told Lily, sometimes people need to stand together. That's all we did. The night air was cool as Nathan carried a now sleeping Lily to the truck, her small body heavy with exhaustion against his shoulder. Rebecca walked beside them, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. What happens now? Nathan asked as they reached the parking lot. For you, I mean. Rebecca considered the question, her breath visible in the chill. I'm staying at the medical office. It's a good fit with my nursing program, better hours than the diner ever was. She paused, looking back at the town hall where the lights were still on, council members visible through the windows in continued discussion. As for the rest, I guess we see if the system works the way it's supposed to. Nathan carefully settled Lily in her booster seat, buckling her in without waking her. When he turned back, Rebecca was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, Nathan, not just for tonight, but for that first morning, for seeing what was happening when everyone else looked away. She hesitated, then added quietly, for teaching Lily what real courage looks like. The simple acknowledgement touched something deep in Nathan's chest. She's the one who taught me, he admitted. Seeing the world through her eyes, it makes the right choices clearer somehow. Rebecca smiled, understanding in her gaze. Children have a way of stripping away the complications we adults use to justify inaction. She hesitated, then added, maybe once this all settles down, the three of us could have breakfast again? Somewhere besides Sunrise Diner, though. The invitation carried possibilities beyond professional alliance, a tentative step towards something new. Nathan found himself nodding, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the spring night. I'd like that. We both would. The drive home was quiet, Lily sleeping soundly in the back seat, the events of the evening settling into perspective with each passing mile. Nathan had entered the town hall uncertain about the future, weighed down by financial pressure and professional setbacks. He was leaving with an unexpected job prospect, a community that had finally confronted a long-ignored problem, and the first fragile tendrils of something that might become more than friendship. Mrs. Parker was waiting when they arrived home, having left the meeting early to prepare Lily's room and give Nathan privacy for any post-meeting discussions. Her keen eyes took in his expression as he carried Lily inside. Went well, did it? She asked, holding Lily's bedroom door open as Nathan placed his daughter gently on her bed. Better than expected, Nathan confirmed, removing Lily's shoes and pulling the covers over her sleeping form. The council is investigating. Harrington's on administrative leave pending the results. Mrs. Parker nodded with satisfaction, following him back to the living room. And that construction fellow Frank introduced you to? She lowered herself into her favorite armchair, arthritis making the movement careful. Nathan smiled, continually impressed by her awareness of everything happening around her. Potential job offer. Better than what I had before, actually. Meeting with him tomorrow to discuss details. The older woman's face softened with genuine pleasure. See? Standing up for what's right doesn't always lead to ruin. Sometimes it leads exactly where you're meant to be. The simple wisdom echoed what Nathan had been feeling, that perhaps the disruption of recent weeks wasn't punishment for doing the right thing, but rather a necessary redirection. A clearing of the path towards something better. The next morning dawned clear and bright, spring asserting itself in the budding trees and early flowers pushing through the soil. Nathan rose before his alarm, energy flowing through him despite the previous night's late hour. He prepared Lily's breakfast with extra care, arranging strawberries into a smiley face atop her oatmeal. When she padded into the kitchen, hair tousled from sleep, her first question caught him by surprise. "Did we win, Daddy?" Nathan paused, considering how to explain the complexities of the situation to a 7-year-old. "Not exactly, honey. It's not really about winning or losing. It's about making things right. Mr. Harrington did things that hurt people, and now he has to answer for that." Lily nodded, processing this with the straightforward logic of childhood. "So we did win, because he can't hurt people anymore." The simplicity of her assessment brought a smile to Nathan's face. "I guess when you put it that way, yeah, we did win." After dropping Lily at school, Nathan drove to the address Bennett had provided, a modern office building on the outskirts of town, the Bennett Construction logo displayed prominently on glass doors. The receptionist directed him to a conference room where Mike Bennett was reviewing blueprints spread across a large table. "Right on time," Bennett noted with approval, gesturing for Nathan to join him. "Let's get straight to business. Here's what I'm offering." The terms were better than Nathan had dared hope. Salary 20% above what he'd made at his previous company, benefits including health insurance with lower deductibles than his current plan, and profit sharing after 1 year. The project itself was substantial. A shopping center with 12 retail spaces and associated infrastructure, a 9-month timeline with potential for continued employment on future developments. "Why me?" Nathan asked again, still processing the generous offer. "You don't know my work. You're taking a lot on faith." Bennett leaned back, studying Nathan with shrewd eyes. "I know more than you think. Called 3 contractors you've worked with this morning. All said the same thing. You run a tight crew, you don't cut corners, and your work passes inspection the first time." His expression turned serious. "Look, Coleman, I've been in this business 30 years. I can teach skills, but I can't teach character. What you did standing up to Harrington, that told me everything I need to know about who you are." The assessment was both flattering and humbling. Nathan thought about the financial strain of recent weeks, the odd jobs he'd cobbled together, the tightening of their budget. This offer would not only resolve those immediate pressures, but provide greater stability than he'd had before. "When can I start?" he asked, decision made. Bennett grinned, extending his hand. "Monday. Take the rest of the week to wrap up any loose ends. You'll be working directly under me for the first month, then taking over full foreman duties once we're in sync." As Nathan left the office, contract in hand, he felt a weight lifting that he hadn't fully acknowledged had been there. Not just the recent financial pressure, but a deeper burden. For years, he had been focused solely on survival, on providing the basics for Lily after Marie's death had upended their world. This new position offered something beyond survival. It offered potential for growth, for building a more secure future. He texted Rebecca with the news, receiving an immediate response. "That's amazing. Karma works faster than I thought." "Dinner to celebrate, Frank too?" The invitation cemented what the town council meeting had begun, a friendship forged in shared purpose, now extending beyond the immediate crisis. Nathan accepted, suggesting the following evening once he'd had time to process everything. His next stop was the Hamilton Street site, where his crew had been on furlough for 2 weeks. The men were gathered in the parking lot, summoned by his text asking for a brief meeting. Their faces showed varying degrees of concern and curiosity as he approached. "Got news," Nathan announced without preamble. "I've accepted a position with Bennett Construction, starting Monday." Murmurs rippled through the group, surprise mingled with questions. Joey Ramirez, who had worked with Nathan longest, stepped forward. "What about this project? What about us?" The loyalty touched Nathan deeply. These men had become more than colleagues over years of shared work. They were friends, sometimes confidants, a team that functioned like a well-oiled machine. "That's the second part of what I wanted to talk about," Nathan continued. "Bennett's starting a shopping center development, needs a full crew. He told me I could bring on anyone I vouch for personally." The implication hung in the air for a moment before understanding dawned on their faces. "You're offering to take us with you?" Joey asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "If you want to come," Nathan confirmed. "Same pay structure, better benefits, More stability than we've had here lately. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Handshakes, backslaps, questions about the project and timeline. These men had families too, had felt the strain of the unexpected furlough. The opportunity to move as a unit to a more secure position was welcomed with relief. As the impromptu celebration wound down, Joey lingered behind as others returned to their vehicles. "We heard about the town council meeting," he said quietly, "about you standing up to Harrington." Word gets around. Nathan nodded, unsurprised that the news had traveled. Millwood was still small enough for such stories to circulate quickly. Joey's weathered face creased in a rare serious expression. "Wanted you to know, we're proud to work with you. Not everyone would have done what you did. Most would have kept their heads down, looked the other way." The simple acknowledgement from someone whose opinion Nathan valued deeply meant more than any official vindication. "Thanks, Joey. That means a lot." As Joey walked away, Nathan felt the final pieces settling into place. A new job, his crew intact, the community beginning to address long-ignored issues. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The investigation into Harrington would take time, the full consequences of his actions still to be determined. But it was movement in the right direction, momentum toward a better future. That evening, Nathan took Lily to the park, fulfilling a promise made weeks earlier but delayed by recent events. As she ran toward the playground, her energy inexhaustible, he settled on a bench to watch. The simple joy of seeing her play, free from adult concerns, was a balm after the intensity of recent weeks. A familiar figure approached, Rebecca, still in her medical office attire, a hesitant smile on her face. "Hope you don't mind," she said, settling beside him on the bench. "Frank mentioned you might be here. Thought I'd say congratulations in person." Nathan welcomed her presence, surprised by how natural it felt to have her join them. Lily spotted Rebecca and waved enthusiastically from the top of the slide before launching herself down with fearless abandon. "She seems happy," Rebecca observed. "Kids are resilient that way." "More than we give them credit for," Nathan agreed. Watching Lily navigate the playground with confident independence, he added, "She asks about you, you know. Wants to know if you're still scared." Rebecca's expression softened. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that you were brave enough to speak up, and now things are changing. That sometimes being brave means being scared but doing the right thing anyway." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, watching Lily join a group of children organizing some complex game involving the jungle gym. "She's lucky to have you as her father," she said finally, "to see that example every day." The compliment warmed him in unexpected ways. "I'm the lucky one," he corrected gently. "She makes me better than I would be on my own." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park. It was Rebecca who finally broke the contemplative mood. "Did you ever think that morning at the diner that we'd end up here? That standing up once would change so many things?" Nathan considered the question, tracing the path from that initial confrontation to the present moment. "Not specifically this, no. But I think," he paused, finding the right words, "I think once you decide not to look away, you can't go back to pretending you don't see. And that changes everything, whether you're ready for it or not." Rebecca nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Courage isn't a single moment, is it? It's a choice you keep making, even when it would be easier not to." The insight resonated deeply with Nathan's own experience. The daily decisions to move forward despite uncertainty, to do the right thing even when costly, to show Lily through actions rather than just words what it meant to live with integrity. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the park, Lily ran back to them, breathless with exertion and happiness. "Can Miss Rebecca come for dinner?" she asked without preamble, the directness of childhood cutting through adult hesitation. Nathan glanced at Rebecca, eyebrows raised in question. "You're welcome to join us. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread." The invitation hung in the air between them, carrying possibilities beyond a simple meal. Rebecca's smile held warmth that reached her eyes. The shadows of recent weeks lifted at least temporarily. "I'd like that very much," she said. "Both the spaghetti and the company." As they walked toward the parking lot, Lily between them chattering about her playground adventures, Nathan felt a sense of rightness settle over him. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. There would still be challenges, adjustments, moments of uncertainty, but for the first time since Marie's death, he felt like they were moving towards something rather than simply surviving. 3 months later, the shopping center project was well underway, steel beams rising against the summer sky. Nathan's crew had settled into their new roles with Bennett Construction, the transition smoother than anyone had expected. The investigative committee had completed its work, resulting in Harrington's removal from the town council and multiple civil suits filed by former employees. Sunrise Diner had new ownership. Frank and 3 other long-term employees had pooled resources to buy out the previous owner when financial irregularities connected to Harrington came to light. The establishment had been renamed Moretti's and instituted strict policies against harassment, becoming something of a local symbol for positive change. Nathan and Rebecca's friendship had deepened gradually, weekend breakfasts with Lily evolving into family movie nights, hiking trips, and quiet evenings on Nathan's porch after Lily was asleep. They moved carefully, both aware of past wounds and future possibilities, building trust through shared experiences rather than rushed emotions. On a warm August evening, they sat on that porch watching fireflies rise from the lawn as Lily slept inside. The simple contentment of the moment, crickets chirping, stars emerging in the darkening sky, the comfortable silence of 2 people at ease with each other, felt like a gift Nathan hadn't expected to receive again. "I've been thinking," Rebecca said, her voice quiet in the gathering dusk, "about that morning at the diner. How different things might have been if you'd looked away like everyone else." Nathan considered the alternate path, the road not taken. "I couldn't have lived with myself," he said simply. "Not with Lily watching, not with you needing help. Some choices define who we are." Rebecca's hand found his in the darkness, warm and solid. "I used to think courage was this big, dramatic thing, rushing into burning buildings, confronting armed criminals. But now I think maybe it's quieter than that. Maybe it's just refusing to look away when it would be easier not to see." The insight resonated with Nathan's own journey, from the man who had hesitated that morning in the diner to someone who had found strength in standing firm despite consequences. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't what you do," he reflected. "It's simply being willing to see what's happening and call it what it is. The rest follows from that first choice." In the quiet of the summer evening, surrounded by the gentle symphony of night insects and distant neighborhood sounds, Nathan felt the final pieces of their shared story settling into place. Not an ending, but a continuation. A community beginning to heal. A family expanding beyond blood ties. 2 people finding unexpected connection through shared values rather than perfect circumstances. The path forward wasn't certain. There would be challenges, adjustments, moments of doubt. But sitting there with Rebecca's hand in his, with Lily sleeping peacefully inside, with a job that valued his integrity, in a community that had finally confronted long-ignored truths, Nathan felt something he hadn't expected to find again after Marie's death. Hope, not just for survival but for flourishing, for building something new from the foundation of doing what was right, even when it had seemed like everything might be lost. "Sometimes courage costs you everything," he thought, the words forming with quiet certainty. "And sometimes it leads you exactly where you need to be."